Welcome back. CyberSpace. Empirical training. Do you know what I mean? So they're like empirical training. Welcome back.
Hello and welcome back to the CyberSpace podcast by Empirical Training. I'm joined once again by Robbie, one of the founders of Empirical Training and our Security Operations Center leader, consultant, expert. My name's Josh. I'm your usual host, and we are Empirical Training, who are essentially four former colleagues, now friends, who all met in cybersecurity, wanting to share our experience, our insight, whether that means helping people stay a little bit safer online, staying a little bit more private, or whether that's getting people into the industry to actually get their first cybersecurity job and have a taste of the career that we've so far loved and enjoyed, and recommend everybody else to jump on this because it's really rewarding and it really challenges us on a daily basis. That's why we keep going at it. And I think there's a lot of people who can be successful here who might not realize unless they have the right kind of push, nudge, and encouragement. So that's what we do on our social medias. That's what we do on our school community. Come and find us, Empirical Training. You'll find us on all the socials, or Empirical Training School with a K, and you'll find access to myself, Robbie, and the two others as we help guide people into this industry. So Robbie, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, very well. Is this a scam stories? Part two?
It's not quite. This is the Verizon DBIR 24 breach report in review. So DBIR, data breach incident response or incident report, and it is my favorite report. And I know we are getting calls for Scam Stories Part 2, and probably people got excited when they heard Robbie was here at the top of the call. We're working on those. Keep sending those scam stories in. We'd love to dissect some more of those and share those on the pod in future episodes.
Yeah, we'll keep going with that. Let's give us a bit of a synopsis then of Verizon and the DB report.
Absolutely. So I'm a big fan of this. I read this every year. I kind of, to the point now, it's a little sad. I get excited when it comes out because I think this is one of the best written reports that I've ever read, because it has this air of it's not corporate. It's not super polished. Well, it is very polished, but it's very natural. I feel like I'm talking to cybersecurity professionals when I read it. And what it's about is probably more important. Is about analysis of the previous year or so of real world breaches and real world incidents. So I think breaches are normally more interesting to me when they are successful and they get in, but the incidents are also kind of interesting too. But it just shows you all sorts of overviews of who is getting attacked, how are they getting targeted, what type of techniques they're using. Is it phishing? Is it social engineering? Is it credential attack? Is it exploits? Is it something else? Has there been any use of Gen AI? They did a little focus on that this year to see if that had changed any of the data, and where are they being attacked. What kind of assets is it your web servers, is it your cloud environments, and so on, which for me I think is really relevant to have this insight, because it's 10,000 breaches they analyze and even more incidents or potential breaches that never quite were. That really gives me the understanding of what my perception might be from the things I see on a daily basis, the things I study, but actually kind of zooming out and looking at it. Is what I'm focusing on, is what we're talking about in the industry. Maybe it's a bit of a buzzword, it's sensationalism. Does the data back it up? Is it actually what we're facing kind of on the battlefield out there in the wild? So have you seen this report before, Robbie? Have you encountered this or any things like this?
Yeah, like, are we heading in the right direction as security companies or big companies that care about their own security, or if MSSPs caring about the customers' security? I admittedly have never read this report. Might have to give me a little bit of slap on the wrist there. I've heard of it, and obviously there's a lot of different ways that you can like utilize this report to future, like better protect customers' networks. Obviously it's definitely a useful thing.
That might be a question I ask you at the end. Is when we're going to go through the kind of key highlights and headlines today. There was a lot in there. It's about 100+ page report, and I could dive into a lot more rabbit holes, which we'll save for another time. But I'll ask you at the end, hey, knowing this now, having access to this report, how would that maybe have how could you have applied this as a security leader in your security teams? Would that have changed anything you've done in the past if you kind of had this image of the entire set of organizations all doing different things? Or is it maybe actually only slightly valid interestingly, but maybe really you need to be focused on specifics for your own organization or whoever it is you're trying to protect.
Yeah, maybe I've had the blinkers on. Maybe I've just been concentrating on the data that has been sitting in front of me through all of the different customers that we've been serving through the various SOC services that have been available. Maybe maybe I need to broaden my Verizon a bit more.
Tasty.
Coming in with the evening puns.
Yeah, and the Verizon, we would say who they are for people who don't know. If you're in America, you might have your phone carrier as Verizon, right? They are a telecommunications company primarily, but they have a real big security arm also. And this report is famous. They've been doing this for years. They have a great reputation, which I think is only immediately seen it grow each year. People are willing to contribute the data. We've also seen, I mentioned 10,000 breaches that they've analyzed this time. There's also been a real uptake in people, or organizations rather, being a bit more transparent with what happens when a breach, right? I know we've sat down before and we see something in the news from some big corporation trying to work out. They've said, oh, there's been a breach, and there's about 3 sentences that say data was stolen. We are working to resolve the issue, and they don't tell you exactly what happens all the time. They kind of a bit secretive, which I get maybe the lawyers or PR people are tying their hands, but as we covered with AJ in the previous podcast around the British Library, having transparency about what went wrong and how you fell down, where your pitfalls were, is super valuable, because it not only shows that you've learned the lessons to go and improve your security posture going forward, it also means everyone else can learn those lessons and really tie it to real world impacts. Because that's one of the hardest things as a security professional that we face is saying, here's what you need to do, and like, yeah, I know I need to do that makes perfect sense, but they don't actually go and do it. When you can actually tie it to consequences, impacts, and say, hey, did you hear about this in the news? Yeah, you did. Well, that's because they didn't do this. Or, hey, you want to have that big deal with that big company coming up? Well, if you don't have good security, they're going to not want to deal with you, because by you having weak security, you could have that knock-on effect. And they know that now because of the kind of increased focus and sharing we have about where weaknesses are in the chain, where people fall short. So I think there's a lot of uses here. It is, not you're thinking about it now, maybe you should have had this perspective, but I do think this is about having the balance of both perspectives, right? This kind of top level perspective, everything is great, but you can't make all your security decisions based on an average of every single organization. Everyone does have different nuances and challenges, but 100% we can take some of these pieces away with us. So
and big companies, I am excited. Big companies, a lot of them do care about money and about success for their own company, and then customer trust or the security of customers' data sometimes can be an afterthought. We just got finished watching the Ashley Madison documentary on Netflix, and it's so interesting. I don't know if you are aware of. Yeah, so just to give you just a brief breakdown, their database got hacked. Their whole network got hacked. Literally, absolutely everything. Even like the CEO's emails were hacked and leaked. For like the second stage, and the hackers were reaching out to them saying, "Yeah, cease all business for your company, otherwise we're going to release all of this customer data." And it was, people that were trying to have or committing adultery, and they decided that they weren't going to cease operations. They were going to carry on, and they followed through, and they leaked like thousands of customer records onto the dark web. And then it was it was a bit of a frenzy. Journalists were jumping on it, and then again, the second phase, they were like, right, go on, cease operations, otherwise we're going to leak some more information. Then they leaked more information about the CEO, and then he ended up stepping down, and it was all just because they wanted to just carry on making money.
And that's actually a really kind of nice segue. We could definitely have a whole podcast on that, and maybe we should. But that extortion, that kind of saying, do this or else we're going to do this, that's a huge theme actually in this current Verizon DBIR. And one of the things that maybe it's worth starting with, because ransomware is something we talk about a lot in the industry. Everyone cares about ransomware. You say ransomware, you get people's attention, right? And it kind of annoys me to a degree, because ransomware is really an end objective, right? And if you're just thinking about that end objective, it's like, sometimes it's if you can stop things further upstream, if you can stop it ever becoming an issue where it could be potentially ransomware in the first place, that is a way better solution. But Also, I incorrectly called, I'm going to out myself here. I called that we'd be seeing the end of ransomware probably about 4 years ago. I thought, actually, I think we get wising up a bit to this. It's hard to get enough machines to actually deploy that encryption payload and lock up all the machines. And I thought people were getting more data segmentation, zero trust, better threat detection and response, that we were going to see less and less of it. Ransomware has been on the rise ever since I've said that. And I think that it's mainly because we've extended the definition of ransomware to include any sort of extortion, anything we ask for a ransomware. It's no longer just we've encrypted all your machines so no one can access them now. It's now, like you said, actually, imagine we stole the data. And if you don't pay us or do whatever they want you to do, they're going to release on the dark web. They might even notify the people or the authorities that you haven't declared a data breach. So you get a big fine from them. So there's these like double, triple, even quadruple extortion techniques that they now use. So one of the things I was so happy to see in this report is maybe they listened to the pod. They separated out ransomware and extortion. They talk about it. They say, hey, look, technically these two numbers, you can count them together and say that there's X% of ransomware. I'll pull up the exact figures now. But actually, they would separate ransomware kept to the pure definition of if they actually encrypt the hard drives, the machines, that's ransomware. If they steal data and try and extort, they said this was extortion performed by ransomware actors, which I thought was a really great way to distinguish those two things, because they're different solutions, right? Data exfiltration can be a one and done attack. You can do an exploit. Like in this report, they talk a lot about the move it exploit, and that was a remote code execute, or basically injection technique that would pull back data from sensitive databases hosted by the MoveIt SQL vendor. And yeah, they took the data, and that counts as ransomware. But that's very different to an actual gaining access, moving laterally, holding on to enough machines, gaining privilege control, disabling EDRs and antivirus, and then deploying a ransomware payload. So yeah, I thought that for me, that was huge. And I don't know if that would help you with any of your conversations when you talk about ransomware. Do you find that there's a bit of confusion there, or even the MoveIt SQL thing? Did you have to deal with any of that? Because that was on everyone's plate for one point.
Yeah, we actually didn't encounter any incidents that were directly related to MoveIt, but I think it is important to segregate out those two hacking methods, if you want to call them that, because if somebody has gained access, unauthorized access to a customer's network, and then moved some data out and then said, if you do not do X, Y, Z, then we will, I don't know, leak it somewhere, or if you don't pay us, then we'll leak it somewhere, or we will, I guess they can't say we will deploy ransomware at this point, because they might have already taken some preventative measures to stop that. They kind of passed the time period there, but yeah, as opposed to just, exploiting a network and then letting the ransomware loose straight away.
Mm-hmm. And you talked about the kind of the methods of hacking there. I'm gonna steer us on to the terms that Verizon use, because that'll help everybody in understanding this. And they call it actions in breaches, or actions in incidents. So there's actions, the things you do, and there's assets, the things you do it to. And those are some of the really two common pieces we're going to talk about. And Robbie hasn't read the report. I want everyone to know I wanted to get his blind reaction to this. Well, blind is unfair because it's a very informed expert reaction, but I didn't want him to know the data. I wanted to maybe surprise him, or not trip him up, but try and get him to answer what he think would happen before I reveal what actually the data says. So let's start here. You're getting sweating? You feeling nervous already?
Do I get a certification if I get them all right?
You will. You'll get. Yeah, you'll get something. Tell you what, we'll round one. If you get past round one and into the next pod, then yeah, I'll come up with something a bit better as a reward.
I'm gonna fail miserably.
So, first question. They calculated here how people gain entry first to an organization. So I think that's one of the most important things, that first point of entry, because from there on, it can be hours or days or weeks till they actually cause a damage. But entry is normally when you or I, Robbie, would jump on this when we see someone doing an unauthorized entry and stop it. So knowing what the common methods of entry are is going to help us build detections or build just knowledge about how to deal with it. What do you think the most common way in for a threat actor was in 2024/23? I'll give you.
Maybe Authentication.
Authentication, and I will give you that because it's credentials. So using stolen credentials or guessing, brute forcing credentials, and that's been. I'm glad you haven't seen the previous reports because that's actually the same as it has been for the last few years.
Oh,
Credentials
okay.
top, but this year it was not as top as it used to be. Right, it used to be kind of head and shoulders above everyone else. So I'm going to have to eyeball the percentages here because they always give a little, what's the word, like a room for error type of thing where they kind of say it's
Oh,
someone.
yeah.
Yeah. There's a term that one of the data scientists we used to work with would be shouting at me right now. Um, standard deviation, perhaps. The
It could
credentials is
be.
just under 40%. We're looking about 35 to 38% of all breaches begin because somebody managed to guess your credentials or steal them. Uh, is that something you see quite commonly? Is that something that we should be able to stop better?
I mean, yeah, like companies should be improving their internal policies, shouldn't they, to try and prevent that? But even at the company that I'm working at now, part time, there's a lot of incidents that are coming through that are like authentication based, like potential incidents. We have to call them alerts because I think that's we do talk about this a lot, the difference between an alert and an incident. But yeah, there's a lot of like authentication based alerts that come through,
Good.
which is obviously showing true as indicative of what's going on now in the wider world.
hmm Yeah. So, and there's a good distinction between alerts and instance. So, alerts being something could be on instances after you've kind of analyzed it, had a chance, and been like, yeah, something bad is happening here. We'd call that one an incident, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, anything that comes through that's like triggered as a result of a detection rule is an alert. And then once you've analyzed that and determined that it's a valuable threat to the customer or to your company, then you move it into a different stage of severity then.
Hmm. And would you have is there another category? Do you use this one, like active breach or compromise? Is that the kind of the third stage of beyond an incident, or is incident where it kind of stays at?
Yeah, I'd say so. For the most part, everyone's going to have different processes,
Mm.
but I guess people normally take on a bit of a universal approach. That it's an incident, and you escalate it to the customer, and then at that point, you're working alongside the customer then to remediate that
And
potential threat.
Robbie refers to customers, whoever he's talking to. They're all the buyers of his security. So it could be your internal people, but basically it's not security people you got to kind of deal with normally, right? To kind of
Yeah,
make them act on this.
yeah. Everyone else bar the sock is a customer.
As a customer. Oh, if only they were grateful. They turned up and tried to buy it. Right, it's more of you're kind of an unwanted delivery, I guess. It's not the same excitement as an Amazon guy turning up. Uh,
Well, yeah, and like that's an interesting one as well because like customers have a certain budget constraint when it
mhm,
comes to security. They're trying their very best to get as much money together through the board to say, right, we need to invest and take security seriously this year. How much can we allocate towards that? And then let's say, just as a hypothetical example, a big company will say, right, we're going to be investing or we're going to be allocating, say, £100,000 for the year or £50,000 for the year to security, and that's it. So then they normally take that money and they come to a vendor, an MSSP that's going to be delivering that outsourced security service and say, we'd like some forms of security. Here's all of our devices. Here's our log sources that are present on our network. How much coverage can you get, or how much coverage can we get with that money? So they're not always going to be
mhm,
fully secure because they haven't got enough money to pay for more security. And like
mhm,
I was talking with some of the guys at the job that I'm at now, and we were talking about the level of coverage that you get with specific services. So say like an MDR service is managed detection and response. So you move in all of your log sources from the customer's network, centralize it, consolidate it into a SIEM, and then you're running detection rules on it. But if it's just a traditional SIEM and there's not a lot of additional functionality, then you are just detecting activity. So you, at that point, you might be detecting ransomware, but ransomware could have already potentially been deployed. So then, I don't know, maybe you're like 50 to 60% covered in your network, depending on how many assets are actually, centralized in that seam. But then if you bring an EDR tool in, so you've got an endpoint protection platform in that's sitting alongside that MDR service, you've got an EDR service, MDR service, then your percentages will go up. And then if you've got your internal policies and the way that you handle your infrastructure and like harden your like cloud environment or your physical environments, then your percentages are going up and up and up. But then it costs money to get to that like high percentage, and you're never going to get 100%.
No, I was going to make that point as well, because
Yeah.
even people with all the budgets, they still, governments, they still get compromised. And I said it before, I'll say it again. Getting compromised is okay. What's not okay is not having a plan in place to kind of be resilient and respond to it and come back to that state of good. Too many people bury their head in the sand and say, hey, all the points you made were very valid, but they shouldn't be reasons for you to be defeatist and give up, and say, oh, I can't cover everything. Well, do some basic stuff, right? Like MFA is some of the easiest things to go and deploy. Maybe not so much on legacy systems, but you can find a way, right? You can authenticate through other bit pieces. That would stop a lot of these credential attacks, right? We know that MFA makes it significantly more difficult for them to be able to get the password and an MFA token. So yeah, I hear you, and it's the reality of the world. And the other point to make is that even those top level people with all the big budgets, state-sponsored, nation-state or state-affiliated actors, they're still out there, and they are, let's say, unstoppable. But right, I've got stats up here there for the report. About 5% or so of breaches involve those state-sponsored actors. Now, could be because some of them haven't been detected and there's more going on than we realize, but it's still a very small percentage. But it's out there that even the best people are still going to have those people with all the money behind this, just defensive, the hackers, the state-sponsored hackers. Organized crime is 60%, but plus is still the main driver for the kind of, is still the main threat actor, right? Criminals rather than individuals.
Yeah, there's a really, really poignant Brian Krebs quote about the fact that it doesn't matter how safe you are, you're always going to get breached. And I talked about it on one of the earlier pods, and I'm kicking myself now because I said I was going to go and research.
You Google that while I carry on.
I reckon I was trying to Google it last time, and I still couldn't find it.
Yeah. Well, Brian Krebs is a fantastic individual in the security space, one of the best, in my opinion, cybersecurity journalists. Go check out his stuff if you haven't, listeners. It's something to the effect of no amount of investment blocks 100% of attacks. It's not that, but I feel that it's something along those lines, right? Maybe one day people will call us.
Please, Brian, please come on the podcast. He's going to be like, mate, you were talking about me twice and you still didn't find my quote. Oh, yeah. Drop me out, mate. I can't find his quote, but there is one. It's rule 1. If you didn't go looking for it, don't install it.
Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot.
Rule 2, if you installed it, update it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to piggyback right off that and jump to that part, because we have seen in the initial, credentials was right. That's the top one. Second and third, very close second and third, both hovering around the 25% or so, is phishing and exploit vulnerabilities. I want to park phishing for a moment, because exploit vulnerabilities had a massive surge. This used to be a really small percentage in the last few years. So it's actually had 180% increase from last year. And one of the reasons they've cited is Move It, because that was very prevalent. But we've also had things like Log4j, right? Really high profile 0 days. But I think it's just the general prevalence of 0 days has really been driving this. And for those who don't know, 0 days since it's been announced or discovered. So you have 0 days and emerging threats are basically stuff that's so new that a patch might not exist to actually go and apply. So Brian Krebs' advice might not even help you when it comes to a 0 day. But also, when it comes to updating and patching your devices, the meantime it takes people to do it is hovers around 55 days, which, Rob, have you been part? I know you tell people to patch a lot, and you're probably not on so much on the security architecture side. But what's your experience with trying to get people to patch things? Have you encountered any success stories or any horror stories?
I think it comes down to to manpower and again budget, because the teams don't have the budgets to be bringing in additional people to be looking after the patches. We've got a customer now at the moment they're on a POC, and they've been on a POC for around, I think, 4 months now, and they can't get the staff to jump on and engage in the last phase of the onboarding into live service. And I think we're actually doing vulnerability management for that customer as well. So yeah, we're sending over reports to them and saying, look, some of your devices or your applications, they're vulnerable. You need to update to the latest patch. And I highly doubt that they're jumping on that. They're probably the ones that are making that that time scale up in the 55-day mark. But again, it's like they can't see, they can't prioritize the importance of it, because it's like it's hard to visualize, isn't it? Until like no one really cares about security until you suffer a breach, and it kind of is the same thing with it directly impacts that, doesn't it? Like if you've got a vulnerable device, and that could be the exact attack vector that a hacker's going to be tapping into. So, and they just they can't see the value of bringing down that 55-day mark to I don't know. We want to bring it under 2 digits, don't we? Let's get it to 9. Let's get it to 9 days, eh?
9 days.
Don't know who I'm saying that to.
Yeah.
Come on, team. Let's get it to 9 days.
But I think
not that hard.
That will happen. I think conversations about that will happen. You'll get people really energized, and they'll be like, "Whoa, yeah, I'm going to spend ages. I'm going to really focus on patching." I've seen some success stories where they've offered incentives to their security and dev teams, saying, they have competitions. You get Amazon vouchers. You get money if you can close things quickly, which has had success. But I think these things lose a bit of momentum when you are literally getting a new critical severity vulnerabilities, like loads of them released every single day, right? Critical severity, if the CVE score, or CVSS scoring rather, people who don't know, tries to give you a score out of 10 of how bad it could be if somebody found this, what they could kind of do with it. And it's intended to help you think, okay, I'll get on my critical ones. And generally people have 15-day target for patching critical vulnerabilities, but there's so many of them that I can see why people lose faith and why this number starts to slip out. And even after 365 days, some of the kind of critical ones that are flagged and talked about to be patched, 8% of those aren't remediated. So after a year, some organizations haven't even patched the kind of most burning critical vulnerabilities that they're present in their environment. So you can see 0 days is successful, right? Because we said they don't have time to patch because there is no patch available. So hackers are like, great, I know that there's going to be probably not going to be a mitigation in place, right? They're going to have to get lucky if there's a mitigation in place. But even if it's not a 0 day, you're still going to find people a year later with those vulnerabilities. And I've seen vulnerabilities in 2017, 2016 being exploited even today. So yeah, it's the world we live in is different than the one that the best practices that we like to talk about. And it's easy on this side of the pod, Rob, but probably these things there can be struggles with patching, right? It can break your technology if you patch something that people have a lot of technical debt, and there might be dependencies on certain technologies, so that if you patch it, everything else breaks and falls down. It's going back to your point earlier about how tying it to the money lost, the kind of cost, and that's why you should invest in security. On the other side, people are scared to fix things because they might knock their systems down, and then their boss will point fingers at them and say, "Oh, you lost me X revenue today," So yeah, how do you balance that the need to be secure and the need to, or the fear maybe of not annoying everybody in your organization by making that incorrect patch or that dodgy change?
It brings it back to like profit and loss as well. Like you were literally talking about, oh, we don't want to be updating these certain devices because if it has a direct impact on business operations, then like time is money, isn't it? So, and that's why you have a lot of like legacy applications and software sitting on on systems that are directly related to making money for companies.
Yeah. And as much as these have these conversations of like, look, what do you want to do as a business? You want to grow? How do you grow? You grow by being online all the time. You grow by having faith in you and trust in you as an organization. And you also grow by keeping your secret source secret, your intellectual property. Security has a direct link to fulfilling all of those objectives. So it has a direct link to your money, right? To your bottom line. But I know people don't always want to pay up front for that, and it's guess sometimes they want to take on that risk. But I think we're getting better, and I think people being more transparent, like lifting the lid on these things and being like, look, 10,000 organizations got breached last year. It happens, right? It really does. You just don't want to be that one, maybe like the Ashley Madison one, where you look a bit stupid and people make a Netflix documentary about you. That's where it gets a little bit, well, pretty unacceptable. Does that company exist anymore? I can't imagine. It was pretty immoral from the start, right?
Yeah, I think it might be. I'm not too
Is it?
sure though, but at the end of the doco, it said that they were still going, but I'm not too sure.
I thought it was a taxi company. Addison Lee. I got confused there. I was like, different types of connecting people.
But yeah, people just think that then they're not going to get hacked. Even like the regular user, especially just the regular user that doesn't own a business, that's just got their, just got their online accounts, their social media. No one really thinks they're going to get hacked. And then,
Mhm.
how many messages do we get on the DMs saying, "Oh, my Instagram has been hacked or my Facebook has been hacked. Can you
Yeah.
help?" We need to do some segments on all of them as well. We get on the scam stories and get on the DM stories of all of the random things that people ask us to help them with. But
What does AJ call
you
them
have to
sometimes?
have that readiness.
AJ sometimes says, "Don't be a creep," and sometimes we get some creeps turning up in our DMs. Sometimes I think they are asking us to help them recover their account. Is it really their account? Because we've also had some less subtle creeps, right? Say, "Hey, I need to track my ex-wife."
Oh yeah. Teach me how to hack, and we're like, well, we're blue teamers. Go on.
Yeah.
What do you want from us?
Yeah, we can teach you how to like have a dabble on against a database in a Kali Linux environment, or using Kali Linux or something, sort of database you've spun up. But that's not what they want. They always want to get into their ex partner's phone or whatever. But back to the report, I've got a few more key points which I picked out that I want to run by you. And after this comments chat, please let us know which ones you thought were interesting, because there's a lot of rabbit holes we could go down, and I wanted to give this overview of the top things first, because I've steered us away from getting too drawn in the weeds of some of these things. And one of those is phishing, which I want to touch on briefly. So we talked about the three methods of credentials, exploit vulnerability, and then phishing. Those are the three main entry vectors that are used. So let's use the language they use: actions, so ways of getting in. Now, the two questions are what we want to ask. And the first is maybe an easy one. Do you think phishing has gone up in the last few years?
Oh, 100%. Phishing's definitely got up. But I genuinely do think that people are getting better across the board. I think they're all becoming a little bit more, savvy to the fact that they're getting scammed. I think everybody, like, just doesn't matter if you're working for a company or you're expecting your next Amazon parcel. Everybody is like erring on the side of caution.
Mm-hmm.
All of my friends send me messages of like screenshots, or they'll forward me things and be like, "Is this a scam? Look, it looks suspicious." And I'm like, "This is good. Like, I love this. Like, everybody's on edge, and that can be a good thing and a bad thing as well, isn't it?" Like, I've even reported emails as phishing in the corporate world that are genuinely legitimate. I'm like, no, I'm not getting got here. I don't want to be up on the board.
And then it got a bit righteous about, well, how dare you send me an unsolicited email that's asked me to take this type of action, and with like, you just look so dodgy. But interesting thing you should say that, because that is exactly what I was going to lead on to, is that people are getting a little bit more aware. The report rate has increased significantly. People are reporting phishing emails that they get coming through. They are clicking more of them. But they're also reporting more. So I think that kind of it seems to be a steady increase at the same time. I think people are open. Well, I understand that even if they do click on a phishing email, right, don't go and hide and pretend nothing happened. That's not going to solve the problem. Becoming clean about it actually means you or I could jump on this before it becomes a real issue. Kind of reset your credentials if it was a credential stealer, or have a look at your machine and see if they've installed anything on there before they get to anything that causes a real impact beyond stopping one person being productive for half a day. Do not click has increased massively as well. The do increase has increased more than the clicked has, and it's a line graph, Rob. So I can't give you the percentages, but I think that gives you a good idea, and I think that resonates with what you're expecting. So hopefully that's some reassuring you to the data backs up your perception there.
Yeah, and the security awareness training and content is getting better as well. Like before, they do have some good videos. I know that some of the stuff is quite cheesy, but they have to like spin some some it's like semi-interesting storyline based narratives into some of the videos, just to paint a bit of a clearer picture of what's going on and make it simple for people to understand.
Yeah.
But yeah, they've got some really good content. And yeah, I was actually logged in and on a demo instance of some of the technology that they've got for like phishing, and they've got like phishing buttons that are integrated into Outlook, and like they'll like quarantine files and do a lot of interesting stuff for companies. So yeah,
Yeah.
big shout out to Know Before for doing their part. But there's always going to be a lot of individuals in companies that just really don't care, and it's hard to get people to care. That's the tricky part about this whole thing, is you're always going to have individuals at a business that are just there to do their job, and they're just not really that bothered
Yeah.
if they
Well, they're
click
too
a
important.
phishing link, 'cause it doesn't, or they're too important. But it doesn't really directly impact them,
Yeah.
because it's not their business.
Yeah, that's true as well. And I think we should all work to live rather than live to work. But when you are working, take some responsibility. I think those are the people that get further in life generally as well. But it's wounded us up a few times when we had some individuals who maybe thought, "Hey, not my problem." Well, it is gonna be your problem, and it's gonna be someone else's. Maybe because we're on the security, and that's why we're so sensitive to it, because we know what happens when people kind of neglect their basic duties. But maybe they all people do make mistakes too. Let's not blame everything on cynicism, eh?
Oh, I'm not going to pretend like I can't even sit up on my high horse in terms of fishing moralistic views, because I am literally one click away from losing everything.
And it happens. I've clicked on a phishing email link. Unfortunately, it was a simulation. And that's the only. I've not clicked on a real one. But yeah, it does happen sometimes. Like sometimes they just catch you at this perfect moment where the conditions are right for you to click it, whether you're tired or whether they actually talk about something you're half expecting. Yeah, these things do happen. So hence why people are going to get compromised. And I realize we're coming up to the end of the time here, and we've covered off some of the key pieces. And error is got its whole section in the Verizon DBIR. So human error, kind of whether that's setting up an environment that the dev makes a mistake and configure something badly, whether that's a person clicking on a link or sending out exposing some data they shouldn't have publicly. These errors are huge, and so I'm not going to dive into the error involvement role here, because that could be a pod on its own. The last bit I want to talk about, maybe last two, we'll see if we've got time, but the last bit I definitely want to cover is assets. We talked a lot about actions, how they get in, and we've really focused here about how they initially get in, the initial entry point, or way in is what they call it in this report. Phishing, credentials, then phishing, then exploit vulnerabilities. What assets do you think are most involved in an entry point for a breach? And do you want me to read some out, or do you want to have a stab at what you think is maybe the top one or
Go
top
on, read
three?
them out.
Go on. All right. So the options are web server, email, end user device, person. And I'm reading these from memory because I can't find the exact graph, so there might be a few more. But those are the top four. Tell me which one you think is the top one.
Before I answer, next time we do one like this, in our branding for StreamYard, I'm going to add the countdown music. I'm going to go with I'm going to go with web apps.
Ding, 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 Robbie. You're absolutely correct. And by a country mile, it's web applications.
Ching.
Well, they really are the thing that's less talked about, I think, on a daily basis, because we talk about phishing because everyone can relate to phishing. They see phishing emails come through. Unless you're a dev, unless you're a security professional, you're probably not really, you don't think about web applications. When you log on to your SharePoint or whatever productivity things you use, you don't realize that might be something that's hosted in your environment. It also might be SaaS, so software as a service. But yeah, there are these big servers that companies rely on that often are exposed over the internet. And if they're exposed over the internet, you've got a front door that any old idiot could knock on. And trust me, they are constantly knocking on that, trying to find a way in and a hole in. And for all things we talked about earlier, right? The 0 days, the lag between patches being available and patches being applied, they are going to find a way in. And usually these web servers are at this kind of almost like a critical junction within a network organization. There's lots of things people need to connect to them. So if it's an internal one, people are connecting to that. Your users, you can connect with all those. If it's a website facing to your end users, again, there are many ways in and out of this, and it's normally connected to sensitive data as well, right? If you're logging on to Facebook, say, as an example, it will have data about you, stuff that's public, but also stuff that's hidden that it knows about your user account. So they are super attractive targets, whether you want to steal data, whether you want to get into a network. So Robbie, full marks. And actually, I wish I did have a prize for you. You've really done quite well, and you've anticipated some of the points of the report. So I'm going to end it with the question that, do you think having insight into some of this kind of 10,000 breaches plus data for the last year or so, has that helped you in any way? We'll be looking back. Would you maybe thinking, wow, I wish I knew this so I could have had a better conversation or have made a more informed decision in some of your security strategies?
Yeah, 100%. I think I've always just indirectly gathered this type of information through other sources, if that makes sense, like through like threat intelligence and like threat research, and it all feeds from this probably, doesn't it? So, but yeah, you made this really interesting. I think this will be a really good listen. I think I genuinely enjoyed it. This was you said, no, I love this report. It's really fun. And I'm thinking, is it now? Is it fun? But yeah, you actually do. You made it fun. Maybe Verizon need to be reaching out to you, and you need to be like the person that narrates this every single year. Maybe is that your dream role?
Oh, I don't know. I definitely, if they came knocking, I would have a hard time turning that down. But yeah,
Sorry, Steph.
But
Steph listens as well.
Oh, he's too busy at the moment. Steph is our old boss, who I still kind of work with, for those of our listeners. But this report, correct, you haven't read it, Robbie, but they do make it fun too. Like this is how I like to deal with things anyway. But that's probably why I gravitate to this report so much, because they are a little bit, they're a little bit of fun. When they talk about like human error, user error, they then go, they then like start quoting song lyrics of like why you shouldn't blame people. Let me quickly find that.
I like that. I thought you were just about to say, this is exactly how I like to unwind in an evening. Crack open my bottle of Chateauneuf de Pape.
Oh, yeah.
Get Mariah stuck into the DB report.
Well, maybe that's how we should have done this. That sounds lovely. But yeah, they will say things like,
love a Chateau de Pape.
Here's a direct quote. But before organizations start pointing at themselves saying, "It's me. Hi, I'm the problem." Taylor Swift reference. We must remind ourselves that after following a sensible risk-based analysis, then it goes into the kind of the meat of the argument. So they are very, very smart people with great kind of data-driven analysis and points, but they tell it in quite a fun way. And I think these data is, have you ever heard the phrase, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics? So sometimes you see something, you think, wow, that means I'm going to have to take this action. They are very measured. They say, hey, don't go rush and start doing this now because you've seen that and you've had a knee-jerk reaction to it. Let's look at this in a kind of broader context. So it is long because they do go into this level of detail. I would say go and read it, but actually I want to try and trip you up next time. So next time we do this, let's don't read it. Let me come at you again, because I've given you the kind of headlines, which I think, yeah, Robbie, you count that on your daily basis. You probably got some bits. There were some things that surprised me a little bit more than some of the pieces we shared today. So maybe we'll save that for next time. See if you can retain your crown as the Verizon DBIR blind reader, knowing all the results before he's even read it.
Security people, any chance security people can make something into a meme or make it fun, they definitely will. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. This was really good, man.
Awesome. Well, thank you a lot, Robbie, for taking the time with me today. It was great to have your experience, on the front line still as that security lead of your security teams and dealing with these type of incidents on a one-on-one basis. And hopefully, it shows that your experience, your lived experience, does mostly match up to what it looks like when you look at it in the macro scale across everything. So that's quite interesting. We'll see if it stands that test next time. But this has been great conversation. I've been Josh. Robbie, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll catch you all next time on the Empirical Training Podcast in cyberspace.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Cyberspace.
Empirical training. You guys are friends. You know what I mean? So like